The Diary of Samuel Pepys, continuing the 23rd of April 1661, Coronation Day. At last comes in the Dean and Prebends of Westminster with the bishops, many of them in cloth of gold copes, and after them the nobility, all in their parliament robes, which was a most magnificent sight. Then the Duke and the King with a sceptre, carried by my Lord Sandwich, and sword and mon before him, and the crown too. The King in his robes, bareheaded, which was very fine, and after all had placed themselves, there was a sermon and the service. And then in the choir at the high altar, the King passed through all the ceremonies of the coronation, which to my great grief I and most in the abbey could not see. The crown being put upon his head, a great shout begun, and he came forth to the throne, and there passed more ceremonies, as taking the oath and having things read to him by the bishop and his lords, who put on their caps as soon as the King put on his crown, and bishops come and kneeled before him. And 3 times the King at Arms went to the 3 open places on the scaffold and proclaimed that if anyone could show any reason why Charles Stuart should not be King of England, that now he should come and speak. And a general pardon was also read by the Lord Chancellor, and medals flung up and down by my Lord Cornwallis of silver, but I could not come by any. But so great a noise that I could make but little of the music. And indeed it was lost to everybody, but I had so great a lust to, that I went out a little while before the King had done all his ceremonies, and went round the Abbey to Westminster Hall, all the way within rails, and 10,000 people, with the ground covered with blue cloth, and scaffolds all the way. Into the hall I got, where it was very fine, with hangings and scaffolds one upon another, full of brave ladies, and my wife in one little one on the right hand. Here I stayed, walking up and down, and at last upon one of the side stalls I stood and saw the King come in with all the persons, but the soldiers, that were yesterday in the cavalcade, and a most pleasant sight it was to see them in their several robes. And the King came in with his crown on, and his sceptre in his hand, under a canopy borne up by 6 silver staves, carried by barons of the Cinque Ports, and little bells at every end. And after a long time he got up to the farther end, and all set themselves down at their several tables, and that was also a brave sight. And the King's first course carried up by the Knights of the Bath, and many fine ceremonies there was of the heralds leading up people before him and bowing, and my Lord of Albemarle going to the kitchen and ate a bit of the first dish that was to go to the King's table. But above all was these 3 lords, Northumberland and Suffolk and the Duke of Ormond, coming before the coursers on horseback, and staying so all dinner time, and at last to bring up the King's Dimmock, the King's champion, all in armour on horseback, with his spear and target carried before him, and a herald proclaims that if any dare deny Charles Stuart to be lawful King of England, here was a champion that would fight with him. And with these words the champion flings down his gauntlet, and all this he had do 3 times in his going up towards the King's table. At last, when he is come, the King drinks to him, and then sends him the cup, which is of gold, and he drinks it off, and then rides back with a cup in his hand. I went from table to table to see the bishops and all the others at their dinner, and was infinitely pleased with it. And at the Lord's table I met with William Howe, and he spoke to my Lord for me, and he did give me 4 rabbits and a pullet, and so I got it, and Mr. Creed and I got Mr. Mitchell to give us some bread, and so we at a stall ate it, as everybody else did what they could get. I took a great deal of pleasure to go up and down and look upon the ladies, and to hear the music of all sorts, but above all the 24 violins. About 6 at night they had dined, and I went up to my wife, and there met with a pretty lady, Mrs. Franklin, a doctor's wife, a friend of Mr. Boyer's, and kissed them both, and by took them down to Mr. Boyer's, and strange it is to think that these 2 days have held up fair till now, that all is done, and the King's gone out of the hall. and then it fell a raining and thundering and lightning, as I have not seen it do for some years, which people did take great notice of. God's blessing of the work of these 2 days, which is a foolery to take too much notice of such things. I observed a little disorder in all this, but only the king's footmen had got hold of the canopy and would keep it from the barons of the Cinque Ports, which they endeavoured to force from them again, but could not do till my lord, Duke of Albemarle, caused it to be put into Sir Robert Pye's hand till tomorrow, to be decided. At Mr. Boyer's a great deal of company. Some I knew, others I did not. Here we stayed upon the leads and below till it was late, expecting to see the fireworks, but they were not performed tonight. Only the city had a light like a glory round about it, with bonfires. At last I to King Street, and there sent Crockford to my father's and my house, to tell them that I could not come home tonight because of the dirt, and a coach could not be had. And so, drinking a pot of ale alone at Mrs. Harper's, I returned to Mr. Boyer's, and after a little stay more, I took my wife and Mrs. Franklin, who I proffered the civility of lying with my wife at Mrs. Hunt's tonight, to Axe Yard, and in which, at the further end, there were 3 great bonfires, and a great many great gallants, men and women, and they laid hold of us, and would have us drink the king's health upon our knees, kneeling upon a faggot, which we all did, they drinking to us one after another, which we thought a strange frolic, but these gallants continued thus a great while, and I wondered to see how the ladies did tipple. At last I sent my wife and her bedfellow to bed, and Mr. Hunt and I went in with Mr. Thornbury, who did give the company all their wine, he being yeoman of the wine cellar to the king, to his house, and there, with his wife and 2 of his sisters, and some gallant sparks that were there, we drank the king's health, and nothing else, till one of the gentlemen fell down stark drunk, and there lay spewing. And I went to my lord's pretty well, but no sooner abed with Mr. Shepley, but my head began to hum, and I to vomit, and if ever I was foxed, it was now, which I cannot say yet, because I fell asleep and slept till morning. Only when I waked, I found myself wet with my spewing. Thus did the day end with joy everywhere, and blessed be God, I have not heard of any mischance to anybody through it all, but only to Sergeant Glynn, whose horse fell upon him yesterday, and is like to kill him, which people do please themselves to see how just God is to punish the rogue at such a time as this, he being now one of the king's sergeants, and rode in the cavalcade with Maynard, to whom people wish the same fortune. There was also this night in King Street a woman had her eye put out by boys flinging a firebrand into the coach. Now, after all this, I can say that, besides the pleasure of the sight of these glorious things, I may now shut my eyes against any other objects, nor for the future trouble myself to see things of state and show, as being sure never to see the like again in this world.